now basically we're going to be telling the router how to communicate with the server in FTP. What are the username and the credentials that I just created on the server? Now we're going to go into the router, input that information so it can establish the actual FTP communication protocol. Because remember, I told you guys, we go back to the slideshows. Anybody remember what port number was FTP?
20 and 21.
20 and 21, right? Remember, I told you guys port numbers, basically like little virtual doors in and out of the machine, right? Remember, I told you guys that? So now we're going to the router. We're going to input the commands that I just put into the server so we can establish that virtual door, that virtual traffic between the router and the server by way of FTP. All right. So let me find my router window. I think it just disappeared. Oh, here it is. All right. So now we're in the router again. We're at the router hashtag symbol. Now we're going to type the command config t. So our next line should say router with config in parentheses. All right. So now we're getting ready to program this thing up. So the command we're going to type is IP space FTP username. I'm going to type the word username out, space tech G. So that's the username for the FTP protocol to connect to this server. Then we're going to hit enter. Then we're going to type the password. So it's going to be IP FTP password. And then the actual password was hello. Then we're going to hit enter. All right. So that's task number 7. So we've just input the credentials to establish this, to initiate the FTP protocol. Everybody tracking on that? All right. So now we're going to task number 8. It says copy the router configuration of the FTP server. We're going to rename it and save the file as today's date. All right, so now we're going to type exit EX. We can go back to the router and just the hashtag.
Sorry to interrupt you. If it just has router and it doesn't have that hashtag by it, just has an arrow, how do you get it to go back to the router with the hashtag?
Oh, all right, so type EN for enable.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Thank you.
All right, you're cool. All right, so now we're going to actually go about the process of copying the configuration file that we created earlier. Remember, we did that configuration file earlier with the NVRAM. So now we're going to type the command copy COPY space, and it's going to be startup dash config space FTP colon. Then we're going to hit enter. Then the next command is going to say address or name of the remote host. So now we have to identify the host that we're trying to communicate with by way of FTP, the IP address. And so remember, we gave the IP address to the server of 192.168.1.2. So I have to enter that IP address, 192.168.1.2, because now we're preparing for this configuration file from the router to be sent over here. But in order for it to be sent, it needs to know the IP address. Remember, I told you IP addresses identify devices and they provide location information. Well, we want to send this over there. Well, we need to know, well, where is it going? So the IP address is saying, hey, the IP address identifies the location for where this device is going. So we type in the IP address 192.168.1.2. We hit enter. Then it's going to say destination file name, right? So remember, in the directions for task 8, we said we're going to name the file today's date. So I'm going to type the command enter, then today's date. And that's going to be the actual name of the file. And then I'm going to hit enter. Then it's going to say something, writing the startup configuration. And then it says 664 bytes were copied in 0.075 seconds. So basically what it means is it copied this stuff over to the server in 0.075 seconds. So now we're going to go to step 9. We're going to go back to the server to see if the file actually went, the configuration file for the router went back to the server. So let me click on the server. Let me change my window so y'all can see it. So I'm gonna click on FTP. Everybody see the box at the bottom that says file? And then you see where it says number 1, enter July 11th, 2023. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right, so that is my configuration file that I copied from the router to the server by using the FTP transfer protocol. I transferred the configuration file over to the server. So like I say, the point of this exercise was in the event that something goes wrong with this router, it loses power, it gets damaged or whatever, if you have the configuration file sitting on the server, basically once you get a new router or that old router back up and running, booted up and powered on, instead of you having to go in there and manually update the server with whatever settings that you have put in there, you could simply just go through by way of FTP and extract that configuration file from the server and then bring it back to the router, and it will build that router up on its own, auto configure it on its own, instead of you having to manually go through and do it. All right. So that's what we just did. We just basically saved the settings in a different location. locations in the event that something goes wrong with the router. And that's the whole exercise right there. Anybody lost or confused? Anybody have any concerns? Anybody think this is too complicated? Any concerns whatsoever about anything? Y'all think y'all can do this on y'all own?
Yep.